time, we will open the floor to public comment. Is there anyone that would like to make a comment or address the board at this time? All right, hearing none, we will now move on to presentations and move to item A, an actuarial report regarding the E2 COLA, cost of living option for Sheriff's Department employees. Who is that, Sheriff? Are you on that?
They are right here. They will go ahead and they're going to be pretty brief on it, but.
All right, floor's yours.
All right, thank you, Vice Chairman Marks. My name is Matt Taylor. I'm a regional manager with MERS. This is Heather Rowland. She's a benefit plan coordinator. Mr. Herendeen has invited us in this afternoon, evening, to share some information on a recent actuarial report that was done by GRS, which is a third-party actuarial that works with MERS. The topic for today would be the addition of an E2 COLA based on a contract from 1996. This would be a retroactive addition of the E2 COLA for all future retirees, actives, and the three retirees. The divisions included would be 20, 22, 23, 26, and 27. We are here to share the costs going forward to the county. That cost would be a $162,120. That would be paid out over a 15-year period, ending in 2033. And again, that would be an annual cost. Each retiree, there are three, would receive a retro payment upon adoption, which you all would be responsible for, but upon adoption, for a total of approximately $15,000 for these three retirees, excuse me, and that cost would be paid to them once adopted in, let's call it 2 weeks, 2 weeks time. That's the high level, that would be the high level information that we wanted to share with you all tonight. Again, that additional payment would be made over time, and that amount would be approximately $160,000. And this is based on, I want to be very clear, this is based on an actuarial report subject to change in a year, year to year. So depending on how the demographic works, how the rate of return works, depending on a lot of things, would that change from year to year? This is one moment in time.
This time, we'll open the floor to commissioners with any questions regarding this issue. Yes, sir.
So you said 1996. Curious, what was the catalyst for the audit? Is this a regular and routine undertaking? And then how could it be that, this is 2016 or 2018.
Sure.
We're talking about 22 years ago, right?
Yeah.
That this contract was entered into, and we're just learning about it now.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mr. Coscarelli. We are the administrator of the benefit. We are responsible for, carrying out the administrative duties based on what is shared with us from our customers, municipalities, local unit of government. I can't speak specifically to the contract that was included or involved here, so I couldn't answer that specifically. Again, we are the administrator of the benefit.
So when a contract is entered into, a labor agreement like that, is it incumbent upon the county then to understand what those costs are and start remitting those payments to MERS? And I'm trying to understand the transactional process.
Yes, I'll speak from MERS perspective. It would be the responsibility from each local unit of government to share with MERS the provisions of each individual plan and how that will be carried out.
If I could know a little bit of background on this, Commissioner. This came to light when we were dealing with the 911 issue and those pensions. In the discussions with the sheriff and the undersheriff, they provided contracts. It's always been in their contracts. Somewhere fell through the cracks between the contract being signed and being submitted to MERS. So We don't know who, we don't know when, other than this stopped in 96.
Okay, I have to believe this is a relatively rare occurrence. Do you see this in other municipalities?
I wouldn't say that it's, not in my experience. Not to say that it's unprecedented. I would call it a bit of an outlier. Yes, it's not something that I would see every day.
And then you talked about the value. I mean, depending on market returns and demographic, but that's going to be very marginal changes to the actual 162,000 payment. It might increase or decrease nominally.
I can't say that unilaterally. We hope that it changes, that deviation is a small number, but I can't commit to that. I mean, I can't say that for sure. The projection is 162,000 at this time, subject to change, and yes, we would hope that it stays relatively unchanging, but it will change.
And then just one final question going forward to make sure that nothing like this happens in the future. What's the best method? Is there a best practice then? Is that an internal administration thing here at the county we should be mindful of?
Yeah, I think, not to overgeneralize, but I would say that it is a matter of communication. So, if there are changes or there are changes being considered, that we are coming alongside, MERS is coming alongside through that process. If you're making a benefit or a provision change or in contract negotiation, that's very much a part of what we do, meaning that we'll come alongside, help us understand what changes are being made. So I would suggest that communication being the best method of avoiding something like this forward.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Root?
I was just kind of going to give a summary, kind of what Commissioner McMaster said, where we're at, how this came to light. So they've been working on it. Obviously, it came about through the 911 stuff, and the biggest thing I think from this is now we've found a problem that existed, and we're now on the right path to getting it fixed. And I think that's been a trend of this board the last 2 years, is finding some things that we didn't necessarily start, but here we're tasked with figuring out how to navigate through getting it taken care of. And the biggest thing I have to take away from today is that the 3 individuals that are retired that are drawing will be getting their payout as soon as we get this taken care of, because there was one individual that's very concerned about his pay, and rightfully so. He's a 22-year employee, and knowing that it'll be taken care of hopefully within 2 to 3 weeks is good to hear. So thank you guys. I know it's not been easy for you guys either, but appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments regarding this issue? All right, at that time, we'll move on. Thank you very much for coming out and doing this.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, it is.
All right, this time we'll move on to item D, jail feasibility study of the county jail. Joseph M. Rack, owner of Securiture, and James Escamilla, president of Bryce and Associates. You guys now have the floor. Thank you. Now.
And I'm going to present from this direction here so I can be by the screen. So hopefully most of you can see what's going on. Again, I'm Joe Marac with Securiture. All I do is justice, corrections, and public safety work. I'm also representing Bryce and Associates. Jim was not able to make it today, but Securiture and Bryce have worked together for the last 6 months or so on the feasibility study. So what I want to do is give a very high level overview of the completed study. We could do the same presentation in about 4 hours, but so as not to bore you, we're going to try to do this in about 20 minutes. So we're going to do kind of a high level, I'll let you know how big the bread box is, so to speak. So basically, the feasibility study, what we did is we looked at to determine the 10 and 20-year needs of the jail. Not just the jail itself, but also the sheriff's office. And to determine how those needs could be met through either a renovation or expansion of the existing jail or replacement of a new facility. And we developed design concepts and a construction budget as well as staffing and operational budgets as well, because we know those ongoing costs are really critical. We looked at 3 different sites for the respective building, and so we put this together for the board's consideration on how to move forward. The study itself was done in 4 different steps. Phase 1 we call pre-project. Basically, we collected 10 years of data from the jail and the courts and the clerk and so forth. We collected data for 10 years so that we could make a 20-year projection into the future as far as what the needs would be. Phase 2 then was analyzing that data and making those future projections. Phase 3 was developing a space program for the facility. You know, the space program, the architectural program, is a list of all the spaces that need to go into the facility. And then we looked at the staffing and the operational aspects of the project. And then in phase 4, we developed a design concept and looked at possible site locations for the project. The first thing we did was analyze a lot of data, and the Sheriff's Office did a great job of getting data. So we collected 10 years of data regarding, the county population, the jail breakdown. In the jail, we looked at, what's your average length of stay, what's your average daily population, the division between male and female, felons, misdemeanors, sentence, non-sentence, and so forth. So we looked at a lot of data, and so this is just a slide to show that we collect a lot of data. I won't go into detail because that's like the 4-hour version of the presentation. But we did this analysis first to determine, what are the 20-year needs of the county. So in the end, the 10-year period of the data collection that we did, we felt was somewhat flawed as far as making projections into the future. So there were 3 factors regarding this information we think impacted the ability to do a good projection. One is that during that 10-year period, there was a significant downturn, both in the national and the local economy, that impacted a lot of things. It impacted staffing and budgets and so forth. One of those things is the loss of road patrol. So there weren't as many people being booked into the jails and not as many people on the street. And when you collect data like that, this occurred more toward the end of that 10-year period, and it kind of skewed the projections a little bit. Then also the other thing is changes in sentencing guidelines. There's a lot of change in the justice, delivery of justice now. And so that was impacted, these numbers were impacted as well. So the conclusion that we reached is that the best way to approach this is, because again, we're designing a jail to accommodate future needs and additional changes. So you don't necessarily design a facility for one particular idea. It has to be flexible to adapt to future. So what we did in this particular concept is that we wanted to program a jail that had one cell block as large as we could get it, so that we could economize the staffing and try to operate a larger jail with essentially the same staff that you have now. And then if those numbers in the future appear to be low, design the facility in the future so it can be easily added onto at a minimal cost, and that the infrastructure of the building, like the kitchen and the laundry and things of that nature, are sized for that future expansion. So what that looks like is right now your jail averages, roughly about 130. Your capacity is about 132. You have roughly that number in it most of the time. Our projection is that your 20-year need is about 190 inmates. And then to that, we have to add what's called a classification factor that gets us to 220 beds, is what we think the jail pod should be designed to. Now, classification is very important. It's something that you cannot do now in your existing jail. You have to separate different kinds of inmates from each other, males and females, violent from nonviolent, sentenced from non-sentenced, misdemeanors from felons, and so forth. You have to separate these people from each other. And so it requires a number of different cell blocks. And it never will happen that your jail is 100% full if you're properly classified, because you will never have the perfect mix of each of those inmates in each cell block. So there's an inefficiency factor at maximum capacity of about 15%. So that 190 beds that we think is the future need, we add 15% to get to our 220 beds. And we believe that we can easily, well, we've done it plenty of times, we can fit 220 beds in one housing pod and achieve very efficient staffing. So that 220 beds basically breaks down to roughly 160 to 170 female beds, roughly 160 to 170 male beds, 50 to 60 female beds, and we want to try to achieve about 10 to 12 different cell blocks or classification opportunities within the jail. So the next thing we did is we looked at, okay, now that we know what the need is, we looked at what the facility is now, and can that facility be renovated, expanded to meet that need. This is a floor plan of the existing jail. The jail basically was built and then added onto twice, renovated several times, and this is kind of where it is now. And the way the jail is laid out is this is essentially your housing, where the inmate housing is. Your sheriff's office is spread out kind of around here in the front of the building. You have intake area, a sally port, booking, and so forth. And the building is, from a staffing and observation standpoint, it's very, very difficult to observe. The only, you have staff moving around the building, but they can only see one or two things at a time. That is contrary to the way modern jails are designed. Then on top of that, and we don't show it here in the abbreviated presentation, there's a second floor where laundry and medical and recreation is up on the second floor, which is never a good idea for a jail. Then you have basement space where you have meeting rooms and program spaces. And so the configuration of the building is extremely inefficient. And we compared the existing jail to the Michigan Department of Corrections standards, the jail standards. And there's 23 standards here. And this is the 23 items that they look at. And the good news is you can check off all the boxes that, yes, we have all of that in your jail. The bad news is none of it works. It's very inefficient, it doesn't function, or it's impossible to staff or possible to observe. As far as the Department of Corrections is concerned, your jail does not work. And you have a very high level of liability and a risk of the DOC closing your jail. Then in addition to the codes and standards regarding the jail, we looked at what's the physical condition. And the physical condition of the jail is even worse than the standards. We looked at like an architectural, is basically the security. These locks are, the manufacturers are out of business long ago. It's very, very difficult to get them replaced or repaired. In fact, there are not parts available for anything in the jail. Parts have to be manufactured, and I think the closest person that can work on the jail is somewhere in Wisconsin. So it's very costly, and nothing. They don't build doors like this. These controls here for the sliding doors of the cells are obsolete. The building physically has reached the end of its useful life. Every system in the building, the roof is in very poor condition. The HVAC system, there's a number of rooftop units on, even though they have been replaced over time, they don't really function very well. There's a lot of leaks in the system. The exterior walls, many of them are non-insulated. There's cold drafts and freezing and all kinds of things going on, particularly back in the cell blocks. You can see the steel, there's rusting and water leaking everywhere in the building. It's damaged the plumbing fixtures, damaged the walls. The plumbing is failing underneath the floor. The only way to repair that is to tear up, jackhammer out all the concrete floors in the jail, replace the plumbing and put the floors back. Well, how do you do that when you're full of inmates? Very difficult. The site, the pavement is in fairly poor condition. You do have a fenced area for some secured parking, which is good, access to the sally port, but areas like your staff parking is not secured. We talked a little bit about HVAC. All your HVAC equipment's on the roof. It's an absolute mess. It doesn't meet code. We don't have the fresh air intake required for the jail, and areas of the jail that should be under negative air pressure, which means you're exhausting 100% of the air out of the building so that you don't spread diseases throughout the jail, doesn't exist in your jail. Like I said, the plumbing is an absolute disaster. It's held together essentially with duct tape and baling wire. Electrical system, again, the electrical system is old. It was originally put in the 1960s. It's at the end of its useful life, and much you can see things have been added onto and abandoned. There's wires all over the place that have been abandoned and replaced. And again, a lot of these electrical systems are in areas of the jail where there are plumbing leaks and very poor ventilation, so they corrode and short circuit and such. So in short, it is not feasible to continue to use your existing jail in a renovated or expanded facility. It will cost more, and we'll demonstrate this later. It will cost more to renovate and expand that facility than it will be to replace it because of the poor physical condition of the building. It's besides the poor physical condition, operationally being on 3 different levels, it just doesn't make sense. It's too staff intensive. It's difficult for staff to do their job because they're separated on 3 different levels. And even if you did renovate the jail, what you have left is low ceiling heights, low roof heights. You have walls that are in place, some of them are poured in place. You have to work around them. Any design that you came up with in that jail would be inefficient. There are simply things that you cannot fix. Even after spending a lot of money on it, you cannot fix some of the issues with the jail. So the next step was, how big is this jail going to be? We developed what's called an architectural program. An architectural program is a list, like a spreadsheet, of every space in the building. You know, there's a lobby, there's public toilets, there's a sheriff's office, conference room. Every space is listed in this program, and it's given how many of those spaces we have, what is the square footage, what is the total area of the building. And in sum total, we're talking about a building, your existing building is a little over 25,000 square feet in your existing building. The new jail needs to be a little over, almost 63,000 square feet. So we're talking about a building 2.5 times the size of what you have right now. So we put together a basic design concept. You know, a feasibility study doesn't get into the detailed level of design, but we put together a design concept that demonstrates how a building might be configured. So what we've shown here is, you know, the area and color is what would be considered the new building. Then the dashed areas are future considerations. This area here is where a future housing pod might go. And this area here would be a future expansion of either the intake area, a mental health unit, or possibly a juvenile holding facility. But the green area is the public lobby. The public comes in here, and the public is generally confined to accessing only that green space in the whole building. This blue area here is the sheriff's office. It's about 10,000 square feet total. That includes the sheriff's administration, patrol, and investigations. And that is all housed in this part of the building here. Then right behind the lobby, this is the booking and intake area where prisoners, in custody prisoners, are brought in. They're typically brought in from a car or a van. They're brought into a vehicular sally port where it's secured, and then they're brought into the building proper where they're booked in. They're held for typically up to about 72 hours, classified and so forth. Most of these people book right back out within 24 hours or so, but several of them stay, obviously. That booking area is located right adjacent to the lobby, so that after hours people come into the lobby, and people need to post bonds and things like that. It's easy access. The big part of the jail right here is the cell block, and we have photographs of how this works. But basically, the cell block is where you have 2 cells stacked on top of one another, all around a single control room. So this control room here is elevated about 10 feet above the floor, and you're looking down into all the cell blocks. So unlike the jail that you walk around, you can see 4 inmates over here, and 30 seconds later you can see 2 over here. You can see 220 inmates all at the same time from one place, making it much more staff efficient. Even though the building is 2.5 times larger, you can see all the inmates and all the activities at the same time. The other thing about, well, before I get into that, then at this end of the building, we've got a new kitchen, a new laundry, and 3 inmate worker dormitories. Inmate workers work in the laundry, they work in the kitchen, some of them will work out in the garden and so forth. And we have the inmate workers housed closest to where they're going to be working and housed separately from the general population, so we don't bring contraband and so forth spread throughout the jail. But one of the things too about the housing pod is it's not only the cell blocks, the inmate, sleeping areas that we're able to see from this control room. We've also included 3 classrooms in the pod. One of the goals of a jail is you want to reduce recidivism. I said that right the first time. Sometimes I have a hard time saying that word. But the idea is we're operating programs. There's 3 classrooms, you're operating programs to give these inmates life skills, so hopefully they don't come back into the jail. You really don't have a lot of places, a lot of opportunity to do that in your existing jail. Also, the indoor and outdoor recreation area is in the pod. So unlike your jail where you have to go up to the 2nd floor and staff has to move up there with them and babysit them while they're in recreation, the inmates will simply move from their housing unit into the indoor-outdoor recreation, and they're observed the whole time from the same person that's in the control room. And I say indoor and outdoor recreation, it's one space serving dual purposes. It has a roof on it, but it has an operable wall on a high section of the outside wall to let fresh air and sunlight in, and it meets all the standards for outdoor recreation, even though it's indoor. So the inmates never go outside, the public never sees them, never hears them. They're all housed in this cell block all the time. This is a simple diagram of how the building can be observed and monitored. You've got a booking area here that can observe the corridors, look through to the lobby, look at all the holding cells and padded cells and so forth. And you have the control room here in the housing that's looking at all of the cell blocks in the indoor and outdoor recreation, and even has direct observation in one of the classrooms as well. So this is a rendering of what that cell block would look like in 3D. You have this control room. So Big Brother's up here in the control room. There's one person that can monitor, control all the doors, all the intercoms, all the cameras, turn off the water, whatever, from this control room. And as you can see, there's a 360-degree view from that control room with no blind spots, no corners, no columns. So it's a very efficient observation. Then in addition to the people working in the control room, you have correctional officers working on the floor, moving throughout the cell blocks during the course of the day. So basically, it takes roughly 3 people, 3 staff at a time to monitor, observe, and control these basically 220 inmates at a time. This is an actual photograph from a similar project. You notice that you're standing right on the floor, right in front of the control room on the lower level, but you can see there's a lot of glass. There are no bars in modern jails. There's a lot of glass, so you can see what's going on. So it makes it safer for not just the inmates, but it makes it safer for the staff. Because the thing you have to remember, your average length of stay at your jail is 8 days. And you have people that serve a 1-year sentence there, but the people serving the lifetime sentence is your staff. They go there every day for 20 years. So you have to make it safe and healthy for them as well. So this is a view from the cell front looking back toward the control room. This is where the control room is. It's elevated, it's mirrored glass. So the control room is operated in the dark. So the glass acts as a mirror. So the inmates cannot see the corrections officer in the control room. This is a view from that control room, from the inside of the chrome dark to the light side. As you can see, even though we're talking about 220 inmates, you can see how close the cell blocks are and how great the observation is. And this is something that you just cannot ever achieve in your existing jail. Typical examples of, we like to promote what we call modular steel cells. These are modularized cells. They're built in a factory. They're delivered to the job site. They get delivered to the job site just like this. All the equipment, the bunks, the tables, the stools, every cell has a shower in it, the toilet, the mirror, the light fixture, the door, and the frame. Everything's installed in the factory. That coating is a polyurea coating. It's not paint. You know, I don't know how many times you've ever painted your jail, but the paint's probably like that thick right now. But this is a polyurea coating. That is the same thing as your rhino lining, truck bed liners. That's what's on the inside of these cells. And you won't ever have to recoat it, you don't have to repaint it. There are no seams, so the spread of disease, like MRSA and anything else that goes around your jail, there's no place for it to hide. You can come in here and power wash this thing down if you wanted to. This is a photograph of that indoor-outdoor recreation space I talked about. It has a ceiling height of at least 18 feet. It's a big area open for recreation. And this is an operable door. So it's got a screen, a security screen there. So the door right now is open. It's like a coiling overhead garage door. When the door is open, you get fresh air and sunlight in it. When it's closed, you can heat and cool the space. Maintenance is critical. You know, maintaining a jail, I tell people all the time that jails age in dog years because they're operated, you know, and there's people in them 24 hours a day, 365 days a week, and if you don't make maintenance easy to happen, maintenance won't happen. And that's kind of what you have with an antiquated jail like you have now. What we have here, this is a plumbing chase that runs all the way around the perimeter of the building. So behind the cells, between the back of the cell and the outside wall, there's a 4-foot wide plumbing chase, so maintenance can happen. When you make maintenance easy, it will happen. So, utilizing that concept, we looked at 3 different sites. The first one is, option 1 is, can we expand? Because the question always, you know, I said before, utilizing your existing jail is not a good idea. But you have to look at it anyways, because if we don't, somebody's going to say, well, why didn't you look at it? So this is your existing jail here of the 25,000 square feet. And to get to the almost 63,000 square feet, we have to add some sally port intake areas down on this end, some program space, classrooms here, and then the housing pod. So we can get it on the site, but we're going to have to buy some property. I think there's 3 or 4 properties. I think it's 4 properties with 3 homes on it that you're going to have to buy. You're going to have to buy all the way to the street to be able to fit that pod on that site. Then the existing jail all gets renovated, not for inmate housing, but that's where the sheriff's offices go, the kitchen and the laundry and classrooms and things like that all get renovated here. Then we have to buy this property over here for staff parking because we've displaced the staff parking by putting the pod there. So yes, it can be done. I mean, there's a couple advantages. Number 1, it's close to the courthouse. And number 2 is everybody knows where the jail is. They already know where the jail is. You don't move it on. But it will take almost, well, it's about 2.5 times longer to build this than a brand new building. Because what you got to do is build this first, move inmates in here, demolish things over here. And you have to basically keep two buildings in operation the whole time, and it takes 2.5 times longer. And again, what you have left by renovating an existing building is not very functional. Site 2, this is where the parole work release building is. That's this building right here. I think you call it the Griffin property. This thing had like 100 names. So, but this is that parole and the work release building. So we suggest putting the building toward the back of the site. So you have a drive here, you have a public parking space in the front. We have a separate drive for staff parking and for secure inmate, in custody inmates, and with sally port on the back. And then we position the building so we can add another future cell block here in the future. And we have a place, we're putting a driveway right through the garden where the garden is now. So we want to maybe move the garden back here. And the reason we do that is this is where our inmate workers are housed. So they can move in and out of the building through here right to the garden. And the other feature that we can't do at this site is we have a 5,000 square foot storage building in the back for police vehicles and things like that. And one of the things that we thought about doing there, we mentioned we have 3 classrooms in the building. Well, one of the things we can do, we can create vocational type programs in a more, like for instance, a welding program or something of that nature. You can't do it in the jail building, but we can do it in the storage and maintenance building. And again, provide more programs to reduce recidivism within the jail. Then we looked at a third, now one of the other things too that's a concern, there, I understand there may be another building and grounds building being considered over here. I don't know what the status of that is, but the one thing about this site, it works fine for the jail and for a future building and grounds building, but if there's any other consideration to moving any other facilities out there, like some justice offices or courts or anything like that, this site might begin to get a little cramped if you put another building in this position. It might kind of cut off future expansion capabilities there, so we'd have to be careful about that. Then site 3 is the 69-acre site just south of town here, and we recommended putting the building on the front half of the site because the closer we get to the road, the less costly those utility extensions would be, water, sewer, gas, electric, and so forth. And again, we've got public parking, staff parking, we have our storage and maintenance garage and so forth in the back. It works very well, and obviously there's plenty of space to provide any future facilities. And again, it's not that far from the courthouse. One of the things we have involved in the cost here is all of these options also include the cost of building onto one of the 2 courthouses a vehicular sally port and holding cells. So we're not walking inmates across the parking lot anymore. It's just really a bad idea with a lot of liability. So, probably most of you are wishing I just sort of started with how much does it cost, because then it'd be a lot shorter conversation, right? But I want to talk a little bit about cost, and these numbers are going to show you what's in there. And the answer is everything is in there. So we give you a number, it's the total project cost. And total project cost is made up of 3 different categories. One is hard construction costs. That's your bricks and mortar. Precast concrete, the modular cells, everything is bolted down. Electronic security systems, sheriff's offices. Bricks and mortar is what we call hard construction costs. The next thing, there's 2 soft cost categories. Soft cost is construction related. We need to buy property. We need to pay the architect and engineer or the construction manager. We need to get soil borings and surveys. Things that you have to do to support a construction project is what we call soft cost construction related. Then we have soft cost that's related to the occupancy of the building. We are assuming you're going to get all new furniture, so I'll tell you there's nothing in your jail really worth moving. I get new furniture, new IT, new telephones, and covering the cost of moving to a new location. That's covered in the soft cost that's occupancy related. Now, your soft costs on a typical project run anywhere from 25 to 40% of the construction cost. So if you're going to build a $100,000 house, you don't borrow $100,000. You borrow $140,000, $130,000 to cover all those other costs associated with getting the building actually done. So when I show you costs, all of these things, not just the hard construction costs, but the soft costs are going to be included as well. So I know you can't read it, and that's kind of on purpose. Right? But basically what we've done is for each of the 3 options, the existing site, the probation parole site, and another agricultural site someplace, could be anywhere. We have a hard construction cost, a soft cost construction related, soft cost occupancy related, and a total project budget. So total project, well, let's start with construction cost. The average construction cost on the existing site would be $27 million. You build a brand new building on probation parole, it's a little bit under 25, so it's about $2 million cheaper to build a new building. And then if you build out on a bigger site that has, you need more utility extensions, more parking, more paving, more roads and things like that, we're up about $26.7 million. Those are the construction costs. The total project cost for the existing jail is $36.7 million. The probation parole is $35 million. And the farm site's $38 million. So the least expensive option at this point by a small amount is going to the probation parole site. And again, the one thing there, if you do that, we need to make sure that we don't paint ourselves into a corner as far as future expansion for something else in the future. Because we're not looking for just 20 years down the road, we're looking for 50 years down the road. So that's the big picture summary, and then you might be able to read these. That's just the same numbers, 36.7, 35, and 38 for the three options. And again, that's total. That's construction costs, architects and engineers, furniture, trash cans, everything you need to move into the building and start operating. A little bit about schedule. I told you that working at the existing site, it's going to take 31 to 40 months from the day you start design till the day you move into the building. It's going to be up to 40 months before your jail is done, because it has to be done in phases. Where if you go to a new building, you can get it done in anywhere 19 to 24 months time. Same building, it's a lot easier to go out to a fresh site, not have to work around inmates, around security. You don't have to do things in phases and move prisoners around. It's just, it's twice as long. And that's what contributes to the higher cost. Because it's somewhat counterintuitive. You think, well, renovating is going to be cheaper than building new. Well, until you think you're paying a contractor to have the job site twice as long, there's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of expenses that don't get incorporated into the building. It's just expense because you're out there all the time. From an operations budget, we have assumed for this scenario that day one, we're going to move 150, or year one, we're going to have 150 inmates in the jail. So we've accommodated not just the staffing cost, but the cost of food, cost of medical, out-of-county inmates. All of that cost is your total operating utilities, total operating cost. So we think this is your 2018 operational budget at your existing jail. This is a 2021 budget, so 3 years from now. So we also have inflation built into this. It will be a net increase of $231,000 per year to operate the jail. Now, one of the things that this jail will give you is the opportunity. Right now, you house some inmates from out of county. That's revenue that comes into the county. If you can offset this cost by bringing 20 additional inmates from other counties, and the most common kind of inmate to bring in is females. A lot of jails can't really accommodate the female population they're experiencing now. So there's an opportunity to offset this cost very easily. As I said, we only planned on 150 inmates being in here. We got room for 220. So that operational expense, we can offset that very easily. So in summary, we're proposing to building about 2.5 times the size of the existing. We're going from 132 beds to 220 beds. All three of our options include a 4,000 square foot inmate sally port and holding facility for the courts. Our staffing is exactly the same. We can staff this building with the same number of correctional officers, the same number of support officers that we have now, and with a relatively minimal increase in operating budget. So the next step is, probably we might have 1 and 2 switch. We need you to review and accept and find that the feasibility study has been completed. Obviously, you paid for it. You need to accept that it's been done. And then number 2 is select a design option, which of the options you think is best, and then determine, based upon that $35 or $37 million number, how are we going to pay for it, and what that millage implementation might look like. So with that, I'm done, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you might have. Dan?
The old jail, or what would become the old jail, you have the cost that includes demolishing that. What does that become? In 2, can you go into a little more detail about the sally ports and what's needed for the courthouses?
Sure. The cost of all of our options 2 and 3 include demolishing the existing jail and planting grass. That's what we have in there. As far as what might go there in the future, you've got some options. I mean, obviously, you have more parking available. If there's any expansions to the courthouse or other justice functions, you've got some room for it. But the budget includes planting grass. As far as the holding area for the courts, we assume that no longer do we want to march inmates across the parking lot. So we have essentially a 2-car garage that's big enough for like a 15-passenger van or squad car, because typically you'll bring a handful of inmates. You might bring 6 to 8 inmates at a time from the jail to the courthouse. So there's a sally port that will accommodate a 15-passenger van. Then there will be a security station in there for a corrections officer and 4 holding cells. Because what you want to do is you want to bring the morning people, bring the people that need to go to court in the morning, bring them over in the morning as a group, and you might have, obviously you'll have males and females. You need to separate people from each other. Some of them might be family members that need to separate from each other. So we put 4 holding cells. You also have a mix, again, classify these inmates from each other, the security station and the sally port. That's about 4,000 square feet.
Is there any questions?
I have a question.
Mr. Chair. Rick, thanks. It's been very informative. You came and saw us, I think, 3 or 4 months ago, sharing some numbers on, I think it was more the preliminary feasibility study. If memory serves me, we were talking around $20 million. It was around $80,000 a bed at that time. What we're seeing here is almost, double of what those costs were presented to us 3 or 4 short months ago. So I'm just curious how the costs have escalated in this short period of time.
Well, there's two things. One is the program was defined. We made let's see, I'll go back to the design. We increased the size of the vehicular sally port to accommodate cars inside. The original sally port was smaller. It was just the drive-through and a couple of storage rooms. We made it bigger to accommodate parking of a handful of cars in there while deputies and so forth are in processing people. We also had the ability to do a wash bay and things like that within the sally port. So that's where some of the square footage went. We also then pulled the inmate worker area out of the cell block and located them closer to the kitchen and the laundry. And that vocational classroom that we talked about in that storage building, that was added into the program. So the square footage of the building, I think the square footage of the building, when we talked before, was around like 55,000 square feet or something like that. We're up around 62, 63 now. So part of it is that. And part of it is, since that time, we've taken bids on other jail projects. And costs are escalating very quickly. The economy's doing great. Plywood, I'm re-roofing my house right now. I'm paying $15 a sheet of plywood. Materials are going up, labor is going up. And so what we did is we updated the cost estimate, not only just the square footage, but the cost per square foot is higher based upon recent bidding and the fact that we need to consider, some level of inflation moving into the future, because you're not going to start this project now. At best, you could start the design, which is 4.5 to 6 months, and start construction at best next fall. Most likely next spring would be the earliest. And there's another year of inflation that we would need to consider.
Again, it's just 100% cost increase from the numbers we saw a short time ago, and I thought those were more industry standards at the time we were presented. So $160,000 a bed just seems extremely expensive compared to where we were again just earlier this summer or late spring. So I'm just, that's an awful big number to shoulder. Obviously, it's very important and a jail is needed, but I mean, if costs are escalating that fast, they've gone up 100% in 3 or 4 months. I mean, how much more can we expect them to increase?
Well, I think the number that you're probably referring to, the $20 million number, was probably that hard construction cost number, not the total project cost. Because, I mean, things have not increased that much. So what I'm thinking, it must be, like under this $35 million, the hard construction cost is $25 million. So the numbers that we might be comparing is the 25 to the 20, not the 35 to the 20. I'm thinking that's probably what it is.
Yeah, I don't know if that time included the demolition of the old jail and some of them other things too. But the question I have is, so how much one of the new facilities, how many acres, will they take?
Ideally, you want to have at least 7 to 8, at least. Now, that will, but 13 to 15 is better, because 13 to 15 gives you the option, an easy option to expand the housing pod. And then also, if there are other facilities like a potential justice center or, probation offices or something else, you can accommodate it on a site in a logical place. So I would recommend, if you can find 13 to 15 acres as a minimum, that's what I would go that direction. And that's about the size of the,
We have
Perfect
25
site.
acres out there,
23?
24.8, I believe it is.
Okay.
It's about 25 acres out there.
Yeah, we have lots of ground, so we build a couple more jails.
Are there any other questions?
Just one more comment, and this is not to be contrary to what you said, but I remember specifically asking you, you were standing there at that table, and I pressed you for a number. And you weren't real anxious to do it, but I recall a $40 million number being thrown out. So I think this estimate is actually closer. I honestly don't remember 20 million, but it probably happened, but I do remember you threw out a $40 million tab at one point, because I was pressing you for, just give me a ballpark, just give me a ballpark. And I could have sworn he said 40, but I may be wrong.
There was a $20 million number thrown out there, but it was purely speculation.
Well,
Without
the-
jail
the-
feasibility.
The $20 million figure was based on some tours the sheriff and I have done of some recently built jails, but you have to understand, those
Totally
those
speculation.
those buildings are in like near completion or completed, but they were started like 4 years ago. One off in the village like 3-4 years ago. So that may have been what some of the cost was. So it isn't just in 6 months, it's, some of the numbers Sheriff and I were looking at were based on jails that went to millage 3 years ago, they got loans for 3-4 years ago. So that's part of it too.
well, one of the things too is that, with the study being completed now, the project is much better defined. There's much fewer assumptions in what's going on here, and we know what it is, and it's documented. So, and again, I don't remember specifically what the numbers were that, I had thrown out before, but it was obviously based on a lot less information than what we have now. But again, we have contingencies built into this, construction contingencies, planning contingencies, all those are built into it. So there's, padding in here to be able to make decisions. So if I want to do this, or I want to have that in the jail, you don't have to be told no because it wasn't accommodated in the schedule or in the budget. There's contingency built in to be able to make decisions on what's the best thing when you actually get to the design process.
So in your experience, Joe, all the feasibility studies you've done, buildings you've been, jails you've been involved with, how many come in under budget, how many come in for that number, and how many have been over?
Well, once you set a budget, like go out for a village and set a budget, you have to come in under that number. Because you can always go down, but you can't ever go back up. So the short answer is eventually they're all within budget. But again, it goes back to history of recently completed projects and updating the information and getting the most logical information you can. But the worst thing you want to do is go into a plan underfunded. That's the worst thing you can do. So, I would hope that, on bid day, this thing's cheaper than that. That makes me a hero then, right? But you got to make sure you got all the bases covered, because you can't ever go above that number once it's out there and once it's passed. That's the budget.
Yeah, we don't want to repeat of what happened in Wayne County.
Well, I was gonna talk about C, yeah, Detroit. And also, I don't know if you touched on this or not, but the idea is increase the occupancy, but we keep the same workforce, correct?
Yes.
We will not be eliminating any county employees. If anything, we may be increasing a couple employees.
Well, right now, from a corrections officer standpoint, we have And we have a staffing plan diagram done, but I didn't include it in the shortened version of the presentation. But I think it's 5 staff on the floor during the day and 4 staff on the floor then during the evening, something like that. And that includes your booking officers and so forth. Then you have support staff like your kitchen staff and so forth. And most of those people are actually part-time. But right now, we believe that this plan can be executed for the same number of staff we have now. Now, the one thing I would do is like, you know, when you buy a new car, you still change the oil, right? You don't just run for 10 years without changing the oil. One thing you should do is make sure you've got maintenance staff in the building from day one, and you're keeping up with things, even though it's new and it's under warranty. We might need to look at some support staff like that perhaps.
All right, at the risk of this going beyond more than an hour, are there any more direct questions for the gentleman regarding this? Yes, sir.
But this has to go before a vote, you get a millage vote on it, so we don't have the money right now in our budget, so they have to go before the voters.
Or USDA loan, yeah, one or the other.
I don't think I would ever support going above the voters on a project like this.
Well, even when you do a USDA loan, the voters have a chance to vote on it if they desire.
All right, with hearing no more questions, we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you very much for your time today. Now we'll move on to a presentation from Ranger Power, Sean Harris and Sergio Trevino. Thank you. Yep, right on up.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thanks for your time this evening. You all, first of all, we didn't bring a presentation. We're planning to keep things pretty brief, and then we're happy to take some questions from you all. You may have seen some recent articles just in the last day or two that came out about a solar energy project being announced here in Shiawassee County by a company named Ranger Power. That is us. We are a solar energy company. That's all we do is develop solar energy projects throughout the Midwest. We're active in several states here in the Midwest, and we've got projects at various stages of development, several projects that are fully permitted and where we're kind of moving on to do some more of the late stage planning to move into construction. This particular project, we just filed our permit application with the county yesterday. The county's community development department is processing the application, and then we'll move forward with the process. As I mentioned, we are a solar development company only. We do not do anything else. We've got a combined several decades worth of experience in the renewable energy business. So we've kind of been through some of the battles and have learned a lot of lessons from that. And part of what we've learned and applied at Ranger Power is to try to take a community first approach to development. And what that means is we try to engage in all of our projects as early as possible. So we've been out here for about 1.5 years talking to landowners and talking to community officials, community leaders such as the Shiawassee Economic Development Partnership, and trying to hear from them, what a project like this might look like and how it might work in the county. We've had some success on the land side, and I'll let Sean talk about that in just a minute. I did want to mention that I think the county was very forward-looking in passing a solar ordinance before we ever got out here. That is very helpful to us. It kind of sets the rules of the road, and we know it gives us a good idea ahead of time of what are the community's values, what are the things that they want us to see protected. And so we have essentially, in the application that we just submitted, we have essentially used that solar ordinance as our blueprint. We have addressed every single point in that ordinance and kind of worked backwards from there to make sure that we're able to comply with that. The ordinance includes setbacks from any nearby habitable structures, from property lines, and then from roads. It also includes height limits, sound limits. We have to account for any possible visual impacts. And then another very important feature of the ordinance is it includes a requirement that a bond be posted before we are able to start construction. and that bond has to cover 125% of the estimated project decommissioning costs. The idea being that if anything were to go wrong with the project and we are for some reason unable to remove it ourselves, which is extremely unlikely, if that were to happen, that bond is still in place, and that way landowners aren't left holding the bag, the county is not left holding the bag, the project can be removed, the property can be restored back to its original condition without anybody having to put up money that didn't come from any other source besides us. And so, as I mentioned, we have filed our application just in the last couple of days. That has started the county process governed by the solar ordinance and the special use permit process. And we're trying to be as diligent as we can about sticking to those process. We know that that is the way that the community speaks, and so we want to be respectful of that and follow the process that you all have outlined. So that will bring us before the two townships. We're split between Venice and Hazleton Township. We will be reaching out to them in a formal process. We have reached out to them informally several times before now, but we will be going through the formal process with them, and then eventually it'll appear before the Planning Commission for a final vote to make sure that we are aligning with the solar ordinance. So that process is, sort of out of our hands at this point. We're available to answer questions, any questions that you all might have, or the Planning Commission, townships. We want to be available and provide information to you all as much as possible as we go through that process. And I think with that said, I'll turn it over to Sean to speak a little bit more specifically about the project location and size and some of the development work that we've been doing up until now and some of the project benefits.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having us tonight. We're really excited to be here. We've really enjoyed working in the county. Like Sergio said, we've been working in the county, coming to Shiawassee County for close to a year and a half now, and really enjoyed getting to know the people in the community. And so the project is, we currently have approximately 1,200 acres under a land agreement, and that's split almost 50-50 between Hazleton and Venice Townships. The current kind of targeted area is southeastern Hazleton Township and kind of northeastern Venice Township. And so a lot of our activity to date has been working with landowners, getting the land sufficient for a project of the size that we're looking for in the county here. And since then we've been meeting with township officials, county officials, even state representatives who represent the district that we're working in, and things have been really positive, and we've really enjoyed kind of getting to know the community and working with everyone. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for coming out and introducing yourselves. At this time, is there any questions for the gentleman?
I have two questions. One, if you could give us approximate road boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, do you have any idea the amount, based on the 1,200 acres, the increase in tax revenue that will be provided?
Yeah. So as far as road boundaries go, the area is approximately west of M13 to just a little bit west of Byron Road, and then from about Copus Road up to Riley Road. Yeah.
And on the tax revenue side, that's going to be based on the value of the equipment that we end up installing. We are right now still looking at the equipment. Solar technology is developing very, very rapidly. And so the panel that we end up using might not be a panel that's even available on the market today. And the reason why I bring that up is the value for that panel could be a little bit differently. So we have produced some high level estimates of what we believe the project value will be. We're estimating a $250 million investment in the county, which we're estimating would result in somewhere between about $20 to $25 million of revenue over the first 25 years or so of the project. Our land agreements are either purchase option agreements, that's a minority. Most of them are long-term easement agreements that allow us to be out there for 40 years. So that first 25 years of revenue is only the first chunk. We could be out there for quite a bit longer than that. And then, as I mentioned before, once we restore the property, that'll be done on our expense. And in addition, we don't expect to draw on county services hardly at all. It would only be in the case of, a true emergency that we would expect to use county services.
So ballpark like $1 million extra in revenue a year.
I think that's what it would average out to, around there.
I have a couple of questions too. So number one, the solar energy, what you're gonna produce, where is it gonna go?
So we're going to connect into the transmission grid, and once it's on the grid, we're able to sell to anybody who buys electricity on the open market. So we are in advanced discussions with a few different groups. We're not able to announce anything at this point, but we'll be marketing it to everybody, consumers, DTE, any public entity that's able to buy power in the state. And we're very encouraged. You all may have heard recently, consumers and DTE have both announced pretty aggressive strategies to move to lower emission sources of energy, which primarily means a lot of solar energy. That's one of the reasons why we're out here. The state has also mandated a certain amount of energy on each utility system. So there's definitely a lot of appetite. There's going to be a market for us to operate in. And I think the last feather in our cap is nowadays solar energy is actually the cheapest form of energy. So we're able to offer power prices to consumers and DTE and all the other companies that are lower than what they're able to put out there right now.
And I have one other question. Jobs, creation of jobs, building it, and then the long-term stability of how many jobs would it bring to the
Yes,
county?
so we did an economic impact report based on some of these numbers of what the investment is that we expect, and based on that, we're projecting around 300 jobs, temporary jobs during the construction phase, which will last about a year. Those jobs are only temporary, but I should point out that given the state mandate for additional renewable energy and the price of solar energy and how popular we expect this to be in the state and throughout the Midwest, I think some of those jobs that are temporary here, those folks may just be able to move over and work in the next county over in another few months or another year. There's going to be a lot of solar work in Michigan. Long term, we expect to have somewhere around 4 or 5 people. That's one of the benefits of solar energy. It requires very, very little maintenance. So we'll have some folks driving around, maintaining the site, doing repairs, whatever might be needed, but it's a fairly small number of people. 4 or 5 people.
Relocate to Shiawassee County.
Well, I don't want to say relocate. We, if possible, we prefer to use local labor, local employment. So they may not need to relocate. We obviously can't commit to anything at this point. We're still, we project a year or more away from starting construction, but we will definitely be, reaching out to the local groups and trying to see if we can have local labor. But yes, it would be about 4 or 5 jobs.
Thank you.
Questions. You gentlemen are probably familiar with the recent process the county embarked on to update the wind ordinance. And of course, it was very contentious and divided many of the community members. Are you sensing any blowback, any opposition? I'm curious at this point, based on your due diligence, what are you hearing on the ground?
I think Sean can speak to that a little bit better.
Right, yeah. I think we were sensitive to that fact and kind of expected some of that carryover with our project, but we've been pretty surprised. There hasn't been really many concerns or folks opposed to the project that we've encountered.
And one of the things that we've done over the last few weeks leading up to the filing of this application, really primarily Sean, has gone out to speak to almost every neighbor to a parcel that's included in the project. We haven't been able to reach everybody. There's a few people we just haven't been able, we've knocked on their doors and they haven't been home, but we've spoken to well over 3/4 of the neighbors to the project and let them know about what we're doing ahead of time. We really haven't heard anything negative from them. And I think there's a few important reasons why. One is there's a decommissioning bond in place so people don't have to worry about this being left behind. 2 is that height limitation. We cannot go any higher than 16 feet, which also means there's no need for the red FAA blinking light, so people don't have to worry about that. We don't have sound issues. Most people will drive around the county on their regular route and probably never ever see the solar project. There's only about 2.5 miles worth of county road where we expect it to be visible in the first place. So the vast majority of the county won't be affected by this at all. And it's only a small area where it will be somewhat visible, but We think that's a large part of why we haven't heard very many or any really complaints.
Just one more on the cost side, where everyone's hearing about tariffs these days from the Chinese, and I know a lot of these panels are made abroad. Curious, do the potential impacts affect this project going forward? Are you anticipating any cost issues? Are the panels built here stateside, or do they come from China?
We haven't made a selection on who we're buying the panel from. A lot of companies that do produce panels in advance of this tariff coming, it's kind of been in the works for a while, set up shop in the United States or nearby, and then in terms of the effect on us and what we're doing, our pricing, there really hasn't been an effect because we knew that this was coming from a long time out. We and other people in the industry were really able to prepare. And so there's, and in addition, solar panels are so cheap that the few cents that you add on for the tariff don't really make that much of a difference. Ultimately, we're still able to offer a very, very low power price.
Thank you. Commissioner Olshausen.
Yeah, Hazelton and Venice Township, I'm commissioner for that area, and I spoke with the people, and I've also been to a lot of their meetings, and it's been very positive over there. I haven't heard any complaints, so either one of the townships, so, and there hasn't been any other citizens there objecting to it that I've been there, so it all sounds good.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments? Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we're going to move on to economic and physical development. Commissioner McMaster.
Mr. Chair, item A, I move to consider accepting and place on file the 28 drain assessments as provided by the Shiawassee County Drain Office.
Second. A motion and support. Items open for discussion. Is there hearing none? All in favor of moving item A on to Thursday, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Item B, I move to consider adopting amendments to the Shiawassee County zoning ordinance to amend Article 5, Section 5.3.1 to increase maximum allowable accessory structure sizes and authorize the board chair to execute all necessary documents.
Second. A motion and a second. Items open for discussion. Aye. Go right ahead.
So, the rewrite committee, Dan, I guess I'm directing this to you, maybe you can help me not. On the rewrite committee, it says something about like 2.5 acres up to 5 acres could have like a 5,000 square foot building. And that would be for non-conforming lots. So is there anything in the rewrite committee about putting the word like existing into that?
I wasn't on the rewrite committee, so I don't know, but that'd be a question for Pete. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
We'll have to ask Pete before tomorrow.
Because, you know what I mean, it's almost a catch-22 there, because
Right.
you're gonna allow these larger buildings, but they have to be on 5-acre lots. Most people don't have 5-acre lots, so I wonder how they're gonna deal with that.
I'll talk to Pete. I think part of it was, part of the discussion was the more land you have, the more likelihood you are to have maybe a larger tractor to mow, maybe you have horses, or you have.
Right, and that's why I was wondering why maybe the word existing should be put in there.
Okay.
You know,
Well,
it's
let's
kind of
talk
that,
to-
it's leaving it open that way.
Let's
If-
talk to Pete
if you
before
If you
tomorrow.
own a lot and, since you have 2.5 acres, we're not gonna let you, buy 1 acre and add it to 3.5, but if you have 6 acres already or something, you wanna put that barn up, then that would be all right, so it just seems like the word existing should be.
Okay, well, let's talk
added
to
in.
Pete before tomorrow. Okay.
You have another question?
It's for the next one,
All right.
so.
All right. Are there any more items for discussion? Yes, sir.
I have an 8-acre lot, so there is people that have bigger lots.
Right, that'd be existing though, but they
Yeah.
cannot get them through the zoning, how it's set up now. Them lots are not obtainable unless you already are existing, so.
We'll check on that.
All right. All in favor of moving item B on to tomorrow, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Item C, move to consider adopting amendments to the Shiawassee County zoning ordinance to amend Article 4, Section 4.3.43 to impose additional buffering requirements on commercial kennels and authorize the board chair to execute all necessary documents.
Second. Motion, Commissioner Bruff with the second. Item is open for discussion.
I have one question on that. So the rewrite committee says, we're gonna adopt this as saying that somebody should be there the majority of the time. My question would be, should 24 hours be added? into that?
So we had this discussion,
And I know you have, Dan, and
And
that's
so-
what I'm trying to clarify.
I don't know, and we talked forever on this, and I could see, I mean, you mentioned this, if you're kenneling your dog or cat, you expect it to be somebody there watching the whole time.
We're just, as we
I don't
look
know.
at it, and it was brought up to me, what is the definition of the majority of the time?
And that
If you
was
say
gonna-
24 hours, then the majority of the time would be 13. You know, it wouldn't have to be 17, it wouldn't have to be 23. But when you just say the definition of the majority of the time,
Still subjective.
what does that mean?
You gotta look into what other nearby counties, neighboring counties do for their ordinance, and just kind of mirror what they.
And the whole conversation was, we didn't wanna have it so somebody couldn't leave their property if they're running a kennel, but we also wanted it monitored all the time, and the planning commission, their assumption was they're gonna leave it up to enforcement officer, and it'd be the judgment of whoever goes out there and inspects. If they show up 3 different days, 3 different times and nobody's there, or they show up once and somebody's gone for 15 minutes, and
Right. And I
That's
talked
the
about
whole
both
problem.
of
I
these, I've
mean,
talked
that's-
about both these, but just saying the majority of 24 hours would mean 13, you know, I mean, that would still give them, 9, or would you give them, 11 hours that they would have to
So
be
we
there.
talked about 20 hours, we talked about 22 hours, we talked about 18 hours, which would be 3/4 of the day. I mean,
If I may, as an attorney, okay, so our law enforcement engages in this, tickets are written, we're now we're seeing in court. What is the lawyer gonna say? What majority, we're gonna
I'm gonna tell
define?
you as a former prosecutor, I mean, what happens is if there's a complaint or something, somebody goes out there, okay, somebody's not there. If they end up saying I was there the majority of the time, remember the burden is on the prosecution to prove otherwise. If you say somebody's gotta be there all the time, well, that can be ascertained. If it was there, nobody was there. One other thing I would add is, when you talk about a commercial kennel, they're not all used for boarding. You got commercial kennels, just if you have, if you're in the business of selling or breeding
if you're
dogs.
reading,
And you shouldn't, I don't know that you want them necessarily have to be required just because you're breeding dogs, or because they sell dogs there. And the other one is that, some of them are required to have them just by the number of dogs. I think 10 requires them. But the thing is that it's not all about boarding, and not all.
right, it could be a pheasant farm, it could be a breeder, it could be, yeah.
Right, and I'm not bringing this up to vote no or to.
No,
It's just a
figure it
couple
out.
questions that
We
were brought up to
couldn't-
me, and I looked at them, and it's like, yeah, they're
We
worth
couldn't
discussing.
really come to we came to a consensus that we don't want people running kennels that are a county away, we want people that are locally here and taking care of the animals. We couldn't, as a board, we as a board could not come to any kind of agreement on the amount of hours.
You would have a hard time enforcing it as an enforcement level if you want somebody there most of the time. It's pretty tough because you have a hard time, nobody's gonna sit there, no police officer, or, sit there for
But with dogs,
12 hours
you know,
to see the
dogs
dogs.
and
It's
stuff,
like-
it'd
it's
be
like
nice
trying to
if you'd be
enforce
there
the
8 hours a day.
Amount of hours of flicker from a wind turbine, and we spent days, hours and hours debating that. I don't know, I mean, do we need to do 18 hours or, do we need to do, 42 hours in a 48-hour period, or I don't
I
know.
think the only enforceable one would be 24 hours. 'Cause
Well, the
there's no
majority
question-
of 24 hours, which would mean 13.
No, I'm not saying majority anything.
I'm not so
saying
sure
they have to
any
be
of
there
it's
24
enforceable.
hours. Somebody has to be there 24 hours a day.
I think you made a comment yesterday, as much as I think it's a good idea to be able to have consequences for people who neglect these animals, The only people who can really enforce something is customers and say, oh, I'll never send my dog there. Because I don't believe that, they're the real enforcement, because the city, the police officer, you know,
That doesn't do anything for the neighbors that have to listen to the barking dog for 6 hours when no one's home.
they can call
Oh,
you.
right. Well, this is all.
Yeah, majority's
all
not
of your
enforceable, I
preferences.
agree with Mike, majority's not enforceable.
Yeah,
You know.
but as far as barking dogs and neglect and things like that, those can be cited whether anybody's there or not. Barking dogs can be a civil infraction, it eventually stops them. They get enough civil infractions.
And I don't bring nothing up on this, but I just thought it was.
No, I mean, that's
especially
all
this
good.
was
Maybe-
worth some
maybe-
discussion.
I don't know, I mean, do we send this back down? Do we?
The language I see doesn't say majority, so I don't know if I have an older version. The one I have just says a person present on the property.
I don't know what is it.
That might be, I'd have to look at it.
This is the one that came out in the meeting packet. You know,
Well, then that's the one.
It says all commercial kennels shall be operated with a person present on the property.
So that would indicate at all times.
That's,
So the planning commission will tell you otherwise.
Well, that's what they sent
Well,
us.
that's not feasible, you know, really, so.
I don't know.
Well,
I don't know.
so I had a question. Does this apply retroactively to existing kennels, or when the SUP comes up for renewal, or how
I
will
believe
this be
previous
applied?
kennels are grandfathered
So it doesn't change
in.
anything
Which,
now.
that's
Not
just,
necessarily.
I don't know, that's what was discussed at the planning commission, that with the buffering and with this, previous ones would be kennel, or would be grandfathered.
Well, I would suggest when the SUP comes up for renewal, they have to comply with the updated ordinance. And I don't know what SUPs, is it a 3-year or 5-year time frame, or does it depend on the application? But I think there ought to be a level playing field here for everyone in this kind of business, and in the future, they know what the updated ordinance indicates. These things have become a real problem. I know everyone likes to move to the country and, you know,
I mean, I can see both sides of it. I can see somebody who lives out in the country that doesn't have any neighbors for miles, and they're breeding dogs, and nobody can even hear them barking in their kennel. I can see somebody having a pet kennel surrounded by neighbors and having all sorts of problems. And you know, where do you draw the line? Where do you place the burden on the business owner of having to have it? And we talked about being monitored electronically. We talked about all this different stuff, and there was a feeling that something had to be done to prevent out-of-town people from trying to run.
I agree. My point was just that whatever the ordinance looks like at the end of the day, it ought to apply to every
Yeah.
kennel in this county at some point in the future when that SUP is renewed.
I agree. And just to piggyback on what you said, if you get somebody out in the middle of nowhere and the dogs are barking, nobody's gonna hear it. But if you've got somebody with close proximity of neighbors that are gonna listen to that crap for hours on end, which isn't good for the animals anyway, then that's a very easy one. So that's why I say 24 hours. Because if somebody's out in the middle of nowhere, they're not gonna abide by that anyway, because nobody's gonna complain on it. So the enforceable rule would be 24 hours a day. Whether they follow that or not is up to them. You know, my guess would be, in the middle of nowhere, they're not gonna follow it. If they got close neighbors that complain a lot, they're gonna follow it. And it does not cost that much to keep somebody there 24 hours a day. You can get somebody for $7 an hour to sleep out there.
True.
I wouldn't take my dog someplace that they're left alone among other dogs, depending on how it's set up. I wouldn't.
See,
But
part of this problem
like
is
Brendan said, you know, the customer's gonna
there's
dictate.
different. Problem is, kennels aren't defined. We should have different definitions or different levels for kennels, because there's the dog breeder, there's the hunting dog breeder that lives out in the country, there's the business owner that's running a dog and cat. I mean, there's different kinds of kennels, I guess, or degrees, but the zoning, the wording lumps them all together. 10 dogs or more or something.
See, I'm picturing a drop off,
Oh, I know.
dropping your animals off. I'm not thinking about the small
So-
time.
So, I mean.
Are we saying that none of this is really hashed out? We need to send this back on the planning and say, let's get a little bit more detailed with a comprehensive plan on what.
Maybe we need to break down the different kinds
Needs
of
to be
kennels
broken
too.
down a little more. I
I'm
think so.
okay with that.
That would be my advice. Not that it's a bad idea, but I think it's a good idea. But we can't just pass things willy-nilly and not, be able to enforce it, then we'll be passive for it.
It would, seems like it would benefit with some additional review and maybe a look at some other counties here. It's just
Yeah.
kind of,
But we do have a motion and a second on the floor, so at this time we'll be voting on it, unless we have some sort of motion to table and send it back down.
I make a motion that we send this back down to the planning commission.
Supersede the motion.
We have to do something.
Now, second.
Motion to table is a superseding motion.
So we have a motion from,
To
to send
table.
this back to the planning commission, and our second from Commissioner Bruff.
To table, you can take a vote on the table.
Yeah, so we need to take, yeah, we need to take a vote on the table. Is there any other discussion on that?
Are we voting on this first?
To table, yeah.
Send it back.
Yes.
Planning.
Hearing none. All in favor of sending it back, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Come on, I gotta write a couple notes on here,
No problem.
because I'm gonna be dealing with this next week, next Wednesday, I believe. Okay, next, just a heads up, I'm grouping item D through L all together. So,
Then we gotta vote on.
we can go, I've been told by, Mr. Herendeen that we can vote, we can put them all together and do one vote. But I have to read through all of them.
Okay,
So,
just
Make a
before you
motion.
go, the reason we're able to bundle this is because all one property with different parcels.
no, they're the same landowner.
Same landowner,
Same
gotcha.
Okay, I move to approve, move to consider approving Brian and Michelle Washburn's request for farmland PA 116 agreements on 9 parcels of land in Fairfield and Middlebury Townships as follows. Parcel number 001-09-300-004, 100 acres. Parcel number 001-35-300-001-01, 75 acres. Parcel number 001-10400002, 79 acres. Parcel number 001-34-400-003, 40 acres. Parcel number 001-33-400-002, 80 acres. Parcel number 005-11-300-001-06, 65.5 acres. Parcel number 005-03-100-001, 20 acres. Parcel number 005-02-200-003, 34.4 acres. Parcel number 005-03-200-001-01, 68.4 acres. The total on that is 562.3 acres.
Support. We have a motion and a second. Item is now open for discussion. Hearing none. All in favor of moving all of those items onto tomorrow? Signify by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner McMaster. At this time, we'll now move on to County Finance and Administration. Commissioner Root.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to consider the bid of the Lasso Carpet Center, $8,546.70 for purchase and installation of carpeting in the prosecutor's offices. Authorize building and ground superintendent to execute the contract.
Support. Motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none. All in favor of item A, signify by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I move to consider authorizing renewal of a contract between Shiawassee County and Casa Inc. to provide a supportive visitation coach for children who are placed in and out of home care in the period 10/1/18 through 9/30/19, not to exceed the amount of $49,998. And authorize board chair to execute all necessary documents.
Support. A motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Move to adopt MERS agreements to amend divisions 20, 22, 23, 26, and 27 to reestablish the E2 COLA option to the affected pension plans of the Sheriff's Department employees hired after September 12, 1996, and authorize county coordinator or board chair to certify the documents.
Support.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on items?
just a quick question. So, I mean, this obviously has pretty significant budget implications. I just wonder, you know, with finance, what's the plan for covering this? We've got the money, obviously, but I just, That's a lot of money.
Well, part of the problem is this is in their contracts. It has to be paid. So
I don't know.
however it's gonna be funded, it has to be.
I don't know if we necessarily got the complete plan figured out, but it's something we have to do, so
We don't
yes.
necessarily we need to make cuts on
Figure it out.
I think this is, one, it's in the contract, two, it's embarrassing that this has gone on. We're all in agreement on this, we know it needs to be done, we just have to figure out where the money's gonna come from.
Well, that's what it'd just be nice to know now, if some thought had gone into that, where the money would be coming from.
Well, and some of this isn't gonna, some of this, we as a county don't owe. Some will be owed by the 911 board. Not that it's gonna cushion it that much, but they will have to cover the costs also. So if it's their employees. I don't know what that exact figure is, the $162,000 a year, I don't know how much a year of that's gonna be dispatch funded, but it's gonna be a little lower, so some of it will be covered by them, but I don't know, we have to figure it out.
Well, I can assure you, as I said on the finance committee, there will be no cuts due to this issue whatsoever. There are cuts that have nothing to do with this. Not that we foresee cuts, but just so we don't want to use that kind of language and scare people. We have the money, and at the worst case scenario comes out rainy day. Gotta pay,
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
And I just echo what Chairman Rutten mentioned earlier. This is another example of stuff we have found in this term that goes back decades, corrections that all of a sudden don't do it. We have to step up and do it, and that's what we're doing, so.
And it may appear that, we were very excited to be in the black last year. We may not be in the black this year. And I assure the citizens that that is not because of necessarily overspending this term, okay? We've dealt with several failures of previous boards, and it's our job, and we're gonna do it. This is one of them. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, all in favor of moving it on to tomorrow, signify by saying aye.
Who seconded that? Oh, it was Commissioner McMaster?
Yes, it was.
Oh,
Yeah.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Move to consider authorizing per the recommendation of the Solid Waste Committee, the expenditure as needed of $5,000 from the Waste Management Fund for recycling programs, specifically with regard to electronic waste cleanup disposal.
Support.
Motion and a second, now this item is open for discussion. Hearing none. Item D, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I move to, for consideration, adding Allstate as an optional supplemental insurance to our current carriers.
We have a motion on the floor, do we have a second?
Do we want to?
Well, if we second, we can discuss it.
I'll second.
We have a second, and now the floor is open for discussion, questioning for our representative here. Do we have any questions for her?
I don't know that we have any real questions. It's not really going to affect anyone. We kind of had the presentation on Monday. It won't affect people. People don't have to leave there. This is only supplemental, so not like we're taking away good to Blue Cross Blue Shield. We're not forcing anybody into the plan, but I think for those that are interested in a plan like this or supplemental coverage like this, because we have over 200 employees, 32 of which are in AFLAC. So there's a vast majority of employees that aren't even using our supplemental insurance right now. Maybe this option avails it to those people who maybe otherwise would use this. Or of those 32, they might consider a switch to this. So my reasoning to add it is there were some good rates for our employees, some good opportunities for our employees, and just to add it to our open enrollment cycle this period, and we'll see what happens after open enrollment. If we get people, if we don't get people, then we can obviously reevaluate it next year.
Yes, sir.
So, the idea is potentially, we could be running dual options. We could do Allstate, we could do Aflac. What if we find that a ton of people sign up for Allstate? Do we still keep Aflac for those that, will those be grandfathered in and they'll always be able to have Aflac?
Oh, there's some that, it was brought to my attention at the last meeting, some have life insurance through Aflac, and I see that being the one problem that could be a problem there, is to just say get rid of Aflac. I would say, and I don't know who all has life insurance through Aflac. I know one particular person who was very vocal that they didn't want to lose their life insurance, so.
To ask her question, it's probably transferable somehow.
So most policies are portable, and life insurance would be a post-tax deduction, so they could pay for it directly, not losing any of the benefit that they currently have.
Would she lose her rate she got when she was 39 years old?
It's possible.
Probably that would happen.
Okay.
It's possible.
I
She
just-
would have the option to keep it though, whether the company still payroll deducts and you guys administer that.
So would that work for you, Lori?
If you keep Aflac,
Yeah, well, or is it better for you to keep it?
well, unless she's gonna give me a good rate, yes.
Maybe she
It is-
really, we're up for negotiations right now.
And I know I'm not the only one that has life insurance, just
Yeah, I
goes
don't
in
know.
my office.
Yeah.
But that would be you've got, I looked at the packet, you've got some great things, but the life insurance is a issue for me.
I just wanna make sure we're not forcing in a year from now or 2 years from now. If nothing else, those 32 can stay with Aflac and maybe nobody else does and we go to the new, I don't know, I just wanna make sure for you and anybody else, we're not forcing out of something or causing problems, so we need to look into that.
How difficult will that be with our finance department to be able to?
If you have them both in place, and this is optional for employees, so, I mean, we can double check with, if there's administrative issues with it, but I suspect you could have them both.
So dual options,
Is
dual
that-
choices.
Is that something we can find out before the final vote tomorrow? Because that's pretty important.
Yeah.
You know, it would obviously be important to you if, if we voted this in and then we find out, well, you can't have two. That might not be a good thing.
We can check.
And we need policy procedures or something, we may have it hidden somewhere in a box at the top of the court
Some
building.
obscure,
Yeah, let's make sure we don't have
State
anything
law or
like
something.
that forces someone to lose something because we made a vote here today that we didn't think through properly. All right, any other questions for the representative from Allstate or any discussion? All right, hearing none. On item E, all in favor of moving it on to tomorrow, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
That concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Root. Now we'll move on to Public Safety and Courts, Commissioner Cascarelli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to consider authorizing the 35th Circuit Court to contract with Michigan Drug Court grant, amount of $67,000 for the period of 10/1/18 to 9/30/19, and authorize the board chair to execute all necessary documents.
A motion, Commissioner Olshausen with a second. Items now open for discussion. Hearing none. Item A. All in favor of moving on to tomorrow, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign.
Item B, I move to consider authorizing the 35th Circuit Court to contract with Swift Insure Sanctions Probation Grant in the amount of $48,000 for the period of 10/1/18 to 9/30/19, and authorize the board chair to execute all necessary documents.
A motion and a second. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none. All in favor, item B, moving on to tomorrow, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Item C, I move to consider authorizing the 35th Circuit Court to contract with Michigan Mental Health Court Grant in the amount of $18,142.50 for the period of 10/1/18 to 9/30/19, and authorize the board chair to execute all necessary documents.
Second. Motion, Commissioner Root with a second. Any discussion on this item?
I'd just like to state that, for those of you who aren't there, this is a new program. This is, just to get it started, and it's a new program.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. Item C, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Item D, I move to consider authorizing the 35th Circuit Court to contract with the Office of Highway Safety Planning Grant in the amount of $40,000 for the period of 10/1/18 to 9/30/19, and authorize the board chair to execute all necessary documents. Support.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on item D? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Item E, move to discuss and move forward to the regular board meeting the selection and appointment of a public defender.
Support. We have a motion, Commissioner Bartz with a second. This item is now open for discussion.
Do we have one?
Mr. Chair, you want to guide us through that one?
Well, I thought we were gonna have a letter written up that, because we didn't want to talk about the applicants publicly, but we do not have that.
No, and like I said, what will happen is you'll get a packet probably tomorrow morning. It'll contain all 4 resumes. In addition, there'll be a brief summary. I can tell you that 2 of the applicants appear to be probably more in what I would suggest commissioners do is talk to members of the screening panel, which would be either Commissioner Root, myself, or the prosecutor, Dina Finnegan, and they can certainly give you their insights on the selection and so forth. But we'll get that to you in the morning, and like I said, I do encourage you to talk to the commissioners on the choices.
Are we gonna then, let's just throw it out there, we're gonna vote on one of 2, or are we gonna be presented with the choice by
Well,
the committee?
you could nominate any one of the 4 who applied.
Okay.
You could nominate somebody who didn't apply, but chances are the board will probably be looking at the ones who applied.
Right.
And if you talk to one of those individuals or all 3 of them, you'll find that 2 of them look better, at least to the screening committee, than the other for that particular role. That's the head of the thing. There's criteria there that wasn't only how they defend criminals, but also they got to be a manager, a department head of a new department, and they got to have some skills in that area too. So again, feel free to talk to the
Let's just looking at the wording here though. I mean, discuss and move forward to the regular board meeting, the selection and appointment of a public defender. So I guess I'm still asking, are we gonna have a choice?
Yeah, I think so.
Or someone,
I
because
think
usually a
of the
committee will
4,
pick
yeah,
somebody.
I think of the 4, we're still giving this board the opportunity to pick the final
Okay.
candidate, but we're limiting it to the 2.
Okay.
We hopefully don't want to get it to this board and then we pick one of the 2 that wasn't in the final 2, you know.
Right.
We're gonna run
I
this.
mean, I would
through
prefer that, I don't
committee
want to, because we haven't been a part of it. So we
Yeah.
would basically
Yeah.
have to re-interview through question and answer all 4 candidates. So I would prefer it be narrowed down, maybe down.
I have a couple of questions or comments. Will any of these candidates be available at the meeting tomorrow? If we have questions for them?
If you would like them to be, I'm sure they would. If you would like them to answer questions from the board at that time.
If you do that, you realize
The
someone's
second
gonna
item-
be here and not get picked.
What's that?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you do that, someone's not getting a job in that business. So it's a difficult situation, to have them come
So-
here publicly and.
Well, I have one in mind, but
Yeah, so-
waiting whether or not so
To add to that, and I know this is kind of late in the game, but I'm just a little irritated that how the process, not the selection process, I'm fine with Mike and Dina and Jeremy. I'm a little perturbed when Mike and I had a conversation, I found out back when this whole public defender thing was set up and you had to submit costs to the state and everything, there was a group or a committee, and I don't know everybody that was on it, but they all set the salary. And I think they set the salary too low. I think it's unfair and it's wrong that this person makes $25,000 less than what a prosecutor is gonna make. Not that the money should mean that public defender isn't as qualified as the prosecutor or the assistant prosecutor, but you have 2 offices, one's elected, one's not, they both have the same responsibilities. They're gonna have to manage staffs. And I know in other counties, some of the counties it's closer, some of the counties it's further apart, but I'm just a little pissed off that the salary was set so low, which automatically de-incentivized some individuals here that are county employees or in the community from even applying. And I think that shows that we only have 4 applicants, and I will stretch out there to say that only 2 that I think are remotely qualified. I would have thought more people would apply either from the county or from the surrounding area. So, and I know it's late and it's already submitted to the state and the money's been allocated and everything, but just the background is, I'm not happy with that, because I think that's a problem.
Where did the salary come from? Because I sat on the committee for almost 2 years, but we have, that committee never at any time voted on anything. It was just a committee to help align this and talk about what we were gonna do if this ever happened. But that committee hasn't met in at least 6 months, maybe longer. And the committee that I was on, we never discussed, we might have discussed, but we never voted on anything. So I don't know where the salary even came from.
Well, the salary came from, I wasn't on the committee, by the way, but, like Dale DeGarmo was, and, I think Dina was.
I was on that
Yeah,
committee, but
Jeff
I
was.
had no part of setting that salary, I know I did.
Well, they submitted the draft compliance plan. The draft compliance plan called for the public defender to make what the chief assistant prosecutor makes. You know, probably it should have been what the full department head makes, the highest pay grade. They do not have the same responsibilities as the prosecutor. The prosecutor has much broader obligations, plus the prosecutor has to be elected. But nevertheless, it could have been up to what a department head makes, and if it had been, there probably would have been a couple other applicants.
Well, something.
But anyway, the bottom line is that's what's, down the road, it could be increased by the board, but you run the problem now with it being the way this is set up. This is a Headley issue. So, to the extent it was approved, yeah, you could raise it, but then you might be raising it to where we have to cover the difference. But nevertheless, the person's getting paid what the chief assistant prosecutor is paid. The assistant public defenders are gonna get paid what the assistant prosecutors get paid. And the obligations are lower than the prosecutor. They have a lot more, prosecutors a lot more to do than this.
I guess if you're represented by the public defender, you may think otherwise, but I don't know, I'm not comfortable with it. I think it's something's flawed here, something's not right, and I understand the prosecutor has to be elected, but it doesn't cost $100,000 to run for prosecutor either, and I'm just voicing my unhappiness with, I think salary's set too low. I don't think we got the applicants that we should have gotten. I'll leave it at that.
I fail to see how having this position is any better than what we have now, so. Commissioner Holzhausen?
Well, we always don't live in a perfect world, and if the people, know what the salary is, and they apply for it, and that's the way it is. I mean, everything, everybody wants a couple $100,000 a year, and there's only so much to go around with the whole system, and the way things go.
Commissioner Root?
Yeah, and salary may be low. We did make sure we asked every single candidate, if you were selected, would you accept the job? And every single one said yes. So no one.
Did you ask the question if any of them have future plans to run, if they're gonna leave in 2 years? Or not?
Did we ask if people were gonna run for prosecutor?
Or whatever, judge, I don't know, whatever. I guess that's one of the questions I'd like to ask is, how long do you plan on being here? Are you using this as a springboard to run for public office, or is this a career here, or, I don't know, just throwing it out there.
Whatever answer they gave, they could change their mind.
No? I know what they've said in the past, and what they're saying now might be different, and my vote would be no on them then, so, 'cause you don't know where they are. I don't know, I'm just unhappy, and like I said, it's not you, Jeremy, it's not you, Mike, it's not Dina, and I know we're in a hurry, and I know the deadline was October 1st, but there's just some things I'm not comfortable with.
Let me add that, it's not an actual deadline, and I don't know, because we're still working out this thing with them, the IDC on other things, we may not bring him on right away. Might be a little later in November, but the board would certainly have the opportunity to make the appointment, to select the person.
Well, I have a suggestion or just a thought too, then I guess. If we're not in that big of a hurry, we haven't had that much time to even go through these applicants. Would we be better off putting this off for another 30 days?
We're in more of a hurry than that.
Wow.
We have a compliance window.
You have 2 weeks until November.
What I guess I want to say is that, I haven't had time to do these, so, and I would encourage all the commissioners to talk to Commissioner and Coordinator Harradine, because I have talked to him, so I got a pretty good idea of where I'm leaning on this. So we're kind of leaving this up to the board, for their recommendation. I don't think at this point anybody's really comfortable with giving us who they recommend, so I guess just talk in private so we all kind of.
Maybe that's what we need to do. If
Consensus
everybody has
tomorrow.
questions, you've got 24 hours to call these individuals and
Yeah.
have a phone conversation or,
I mean, because we don't need to be all over the board tomorrow either,
That's right. Is there any other discussion or questions on this item? All right, hearing none. All in favor of item E, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Item F, I move to consider a proposed resolution regarding the procedures for funding compliance with the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission agreements.
Or,
We have a motion and a second. Item F is now open for discussion. Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Coscarelli. At this time, we'll now move on to Health and Human Services report. Commissioner Wu.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to consider authorizing the health department to enter into a grant agreement with Michigan Primary Care Association for the Duran School Wellness Program in the amount of $150,000 for the period of 10/1/18 to 9/30/19, and authorize Larry Johnson, health director, to sign all necessary documents.
Support. We have a motion, Commissioner Bruff, support. Items open for discussion. Commissioner Bruff.
just one quick comment. This grant's been going on for at least 10 years. Good job to the Duran schools for getting on board with this. It's not available now, and Larry Johnson did say that this number increased the amount that they're getting this year, so good deal for the Duran schools, and it's a good program.
Absolutely. It's
Too
a
bad.
shame the other schools didn't take advantage
Yep.
of it when they had the
But it was 10 or 12 years ago, so.
Yep.
That was my question I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
It's a renewal.
This is a renewal, but it went up, and Duran's the only one that got on board 10 or 12 years ago, and it's not available.
Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, I've been on the board for a long time, it's always been on there, and I already knew about the program, they didn't get on board, so
Good deal.
kind of a done deal.
Any other discussion on this item? All right, hearing none. All in favor of moving item A onto tomorrow, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Move to consider authorizing the health department to contract with Shiawassee Regional Education Service District for hearing and vision screenings for children aged 0 to 5 in the amount of $12,000 for the period of 10/1/18, 9/30/19. Authorize Larry Johnson, health director, to sign all necessary documents.
Support.
I have a motion and a second. Items open for discussion. Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I move to consider authorizing the health department to borrow $600,000 from Huntington Bank to be paid back over 10 years of the annual payments from the health department budget, to be used towards the building costs of the Capitan Center, and authorize Larry Johnson, health director, to sign all necessary documents.
Support. Motion and a second. The items are open for discussion. Commissioner McManus.
I apologize, I wasn't here yesterday when this would have been discussed in the subcommittee. What's the,
I'd be glad to.
is this, yeah, please.
Go ahead, Chairman, please. Hear me?
Go ahead.
So Larry was here, he brought his finance team with him. The $1.2, I believe, million that it's gonna cost to erect this building would be bringing him down to a low fund balance. Through his Rex, his budget director and that, business-wise and stuff, it made good sense to keep their fund balance high, borrow this money. They're getting at about, I think it was what, 4.2% interest, fairly decent interest rate. They actually have the money, but they just thought this might be better rather than in a year or two if things got tight and your fund balance is low, they have to come to the county and get some money.
And you have to stick with the plan for the first 6 years, then they can pay it off if
Okay,
they want to.
well, I figured it was something like that, so, okay, I'm good.
That's what
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions on that item? Good question. All right, hearing none. Item C, all in favor of moving on to the final board meeting, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you,
Thank you, Commissioner Root. And now we'll move on to a report from the chairperson, Commissioner Barnes.
really not much to report on. I did ask starting tomorrow, that our coordinator, we're gonna add another agenda item. Our coordinator's gonna start giving us an update on what's been going on, the things he's been working on. So if you have questions or whatever, I didn't want to blindside him, I told him about this, but a little more transparency and just finding out what's going on, some of the problems that we're trying to get fixed. We're working on that. And the only other thing is, I would ask that this board consider that we do a consent agenda for tomorrow.
Carl, you make an official motion on
I
that?
will make that motion.
We have a motion to create consent agenda for, do you have a specific consent agenda
I
proposal or just?
don't.
items?
If somebody, you want to do it, Mike or Jeremy, I don't know, to go down through there and think consent agenda.
At least,
Somebody.
what is it, E through L on econ?
I don't know if you can do those, those have to be roll call vote.
Do they have to be roll call?
I think it might have to
See,
be
I don't-
roll
I'm just
call.
asking if-
Do the PA 116s have to be a roll call?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so.
They want the roll call, so.
No, I
Just
don't think
whatever
so. We can
put on
double
it.
check.
Seems like we did it
before, maybe tomorrow,
Maybe.
we'll streamline, then,
But we'll,
Why can't we do?
You know,
We wouldn't have to do them
You could just make a
individually.
motion for consent agenda and one could be made up and we could approve it or disapprove it tomorrow. I mean, that's all the city of Wausau does, they show up and after it's on a consent agenda, they've never seen it before, so.
So if you can do that,
Well, and,
consent agenda, we'll vote on it.
if you know which ones are gonna, well, you want me to just look at it and see which ones can go on
And then
consent?
we'll vote on it.
I was so quiet. We'll take care of that.
So do we have a second on that motion? Or, we have a second on the motion. Commissioner Cascarelli for consent agenda for the final board.
Everything pretty much has money associated though. I mean, if you can't do the PA 116s, then,
I think you can.
I mean, if you can, those are about the only thing you can do anyway, so. Everything else is,
Yeah, those are direct payment of county funds, right? It just allows them to enter into a
the
state.
PAs, yeah. If we can do them all on consent, we'll be good.
Bring the drain assessment.
The drain thing we could.
There might be a few things, so.
Well, we'll look for it, and the ones that can be,
Yeah,
we'll,
the drain
we'll
assessments.
put
Thank
that.
you, Mr. Herring.
And, in any event, at the time, if they want to hold something off the consent agenda tomorrow, it should be to do that.
That's all I have.
All right, so we do have a motion and a second to create a consent agenda for tomorrow's meeting. Is there any other discussion on that item? All right, hearing none, all in favor of doing that signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
You're really opposed?
As opposed, we have one opposed. All right,
I think we should vote on.
is that your final report?
Yes,
All right.
thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move on to other agenda items. We have two permanents. One, item A, consideration of a possible action regarding the cancellation or rescheduling of the committee meetings currently scheduled for Tuesday, November 6, 2015.
Or
We have a motion
Support.
and a second, and so the deal with this is, I think we probably don't want to we're not going to cancel the meetings. You just scratch that right off.
I would like to make a motion that we move Tuesday's meetings, if there is agenda items on, till Monday.
Support.
So just run them concurrently Monday,
Or
A through D.
start Monday an hour early?
Like I say, it only took us a half an hour, so.
Yes. Okay, so you're making the motion, Commissioner Bartz, and then second by?
To run the meetings directly after Monday's meetings.
So the first meeting starting at 5 p.m. and then 5:15, and then from then on, we want to just.
Well, we've been scheduling both at 5.
I would just say,
We could schedule
Schedule
the meetings to start at 5. We'll take
Well, we
care.
still have the 5 and 5:15 no matter what, right?
No,
No.
we've been doing it from 5.
so we just do economic development,
So
and finance,
So
and
schedule
we do
all
those
5.
two.
That's
Just
right.
consecutively run.
Commissioner Holzhausen?
I think there's a little confusion when they're both at 5. We should say one starts at 5 and the other one immediately follow, at least on the,
And I thought that's what we had discussed,
at least on written down, so.
but on the
it looks a
agenda,
little
it just
more
said both were
confusing.
at 5.
When you get here, which one starts first, this way you gotta know which one starts
No,
first.
no, you did that. That happens. They just follow one after the other.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, but it
the-
doesn't say which one starts first, and we ought to say which one starts first.
The board can decide, but typically, unless we're told otherwise, we'll start the first one being, the first one that's, we always start.
It did list the meetings and then said
In
it
the
was
motion.
second.
Okay.
So to be
My
clear,
agenda didn't show
to be
up.
clear, it usually should be finance and administration, and then no, excuse me,
No,
econ and
econ,
physical development, then
finance.
finance and administration. And then on Tuesday, it would normally be public safety and courts, and then health and human
So
services.
the three is.
So in this case, next month, on Monday, public safety and courts would directly follow finance and administration, followed by health and human services.
Yeah, but the public doesn't always know that. I think it should be written on the agenda. It wouldn't only take a second to say it immediately after that.
A notice, you'll post a notice, won't you?
Yeah, there's no.
I mean,
Well, for this, yes, we'll, yes, there'll be a notice. I mean, one, you got the meeting here tonight.
Election day. Just think
Yes.
first Tuesday after the first.
Yeah, I'm sure that the clerk's department's gonna be booked. They don't wanna have to be here. Obviously, there's a commissioner, so who are running, they don't wanna have to be here. Understood. All right, is there any other discussion on this item?
I'm gonna vote against.
Hearing none, you got to vote against.
I'm voting against.
All in favor of moving those meeting times, signify by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign.
Aye.
We have no opposed. Motion carries.
Just to be.
Are there any other agenda items at this time? Hearing none. We will now move on to our second opportunity for the public to comment or address the board. Yes, ma'am. If you could, just say your name and then, when you're done, fill out one of those slips so we have it. Yep.
I'm Marilyn Owen. I'm a prior employee of 20 years of the county here. I did payroll, and I'm also a retiree. I've been drawing retirement from Shiawassee County for 7 years. My question is, are these Teamsters, these 5 units that you're giving the E2 to?
I'm sure I
Are they
don't
all
have that
Teamster
answer.
employees?
So the best I can do is, do you know the answer?
You got the Teamsters Command Unit, the Teamsters Non-Supervisory Unit, and the DOLC, which is Corrections Officers, up until those hired before March of 2017. And the board is not adding to them, it's always been in their contracts. It wasn't, MERS didn't know about it, or mistakenly thought it wasn't, so it wasn't applied.
Okay, let me understand, and I hope this is what you're saying. The contracts that existed with these Teamsters, and I'm under the impression that they were all Teamsters, that E2 clause was in their contracts, and it just wasn't administered. Is the E2 clause in the contracts now for all Teamsters, and this will continue on with all new employees having the E2 also?
Teamsters Command